Gentlemen No Class is proud to be a part of the HC Universal Network. Gentlemen No Class is produced, mixed, and edited by M5 Studios.
This podcast contains explicit language and is intended for adult audiences. The views and opinions of Gentlemen No Class are strictly for comedic purposes and should not be taken literally. For instance, like this disclaimer. Now grab yourself a pint and enjoy.
You hear that? That's the sound of Mini Boss from Euchre Heights. Hey, welcome to another episode of Gentlemen No Classic podcast. That when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro.
And we are back into this 2021 style coming at you. We're going hard in the paint tonight. You like that reference?
That's a basketball reference. Nice.
Hard in the paint.
He went hard in the buffet lines. James,
I don't want to get into that because I saw pictures of him that people are accusing him of wearing a fat suit in his last days in Houston, and now he's all svelte while he's in wherever the fuck he's at.
Brooklyn.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Nets. Is that the Nets?
That'll be the Nets. Yeah, good going, Rob. Now, do you know what game this is? You know what game this is? Where they put the ball in the hoop? I'm just asking.
Cricket?
Yeah, cricket.
No, I know it's basketball. I'm well aware of it.
Gotcha.
I don't watch basketball, but I know
lacrosse.
Yeah. Ball, hoop,
lacrosse. Yeah. Well, they're cheesy game out there.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica. That's an Office reference. You just started watching Office.
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah, I haven't gone that far, I guess. I don't know.
Ashley would have been mad at me not getting that.
You like The Office?
Dude, she makes me... Well, I'm just kidding around.
We can get back to this.
Okay. I'm sorry.
I finally got to enjoy it after some time, yes.
So tonight we're going hard in the paint because by the time this episode drops, what day is it today? The 16th?
Mm-hmm.
So the inauguration will have happened by the time y'all hear this episode audio-wise, even though we are live streaming right now on Facebook and YouTube, so you can catch us. Make sure you tune in and see our beautiful faces. Joining us in studio tonight is our good friend Cris Hernandez back. You can be like our political correspondent. Why don't we call it like the Daily Show? You can be our political correspondent. We try. There's two topics that we shy away from on this show: politics and religion, because it can be very, very divisive,
controversial,
and it can be very opinionated, and nobody gives a fuck what our opinions are because we're not qualified to have good. I mean, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but we're not qualified to have decent opinions, so we really shouldn't be talking about it.
But, I mean, it's opinion, so where's the qualification standards in that?
Well, I mean, education, actually watching politics or paying attention to them, I think is paramount.
I feel. Greta Thunberg, she had no education, but she's up there now because of her opinions, right?
Oh, okay, fair.
Hey,
but that's not a political opinion. That's just like a climate change opinion. Well, I guess it became...
Whatever. Okay.
This isn't a
I'm sorry. Yeah, we're not debating.
If you're an activist, you can skip some steps, okay? That's what it apparently means.
Good point. Yeah, okay. You skip some steps.
You gotta have, like something that gets you to the forefront, and then people just ignore all the other bullshit. You know what I mean? Like,
Fair enough.
If Waka Flocka Fame came out and was like... started backing somebody, they'd be like, "Oh, it doesn't matter like what his qualification. He's just a good rapper. Oh, what does it matter? Anything else other than that?" Like, and they would be all over his endorsement. You know what I mean? So,
okay, I got you.
Basically, like our topic for tonight's conversation, we're going to try to keep this as fact-driven as possible. We're going to try to limit opinions as much as possible, if at all possible. I don't think that some of these things are very like non-opinion based, but I just wanted to have a discussion about the ending of the Trump presidency. It's been a very divisive time in this country. It's been a very a lot of things have happened, whether you believe the Trump presidency is over or not, which there are those people out there, and they're more than entitled to call me stupid for not believing them, but I don't care. But I'd like to go over kind of, one of the what will probably go down as the most controversial presidency in our lifetime. If I had to guess, shit, I hope it's if it gets worse than this, like, I mean, it could. I mean, we could end up with President Camacho.
Well,
I guess.
where would you rank this over the Watergate scandal? Like, is it like above? Like it goes down more in history?
Well, okay. In terms of history, yeah, these things are going to be closely packed, but
Yeah.
I think categorically totally different things.
Got you.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
totally.
Yeah.
Because I think that Nixon. I mean, with Watergate, Nixon was just paranoid. I mean, he was spying on the Democratic National Convention or whatever. Was it
The committee, yeah,
committee,
right.
Party or whatever it was. And, I mean, what information he was getting, probably nothing substantiated.
Right.
But the fact that he did it, and you know what separates the two is that Nixon got caught and admitted it and resigned.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
It's we live in this day of the internet now, and where any opinion, if yelled loudly enough, becomes almost like fact.
Right.
And that's one of the things that has been kind of the defining moment, not only of the Trump presidency. I won't leave it just at that, but it has become just of anything newsworthy in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has been if your opinion is yelled loud enough, like you it becomes fact. And if you stand against it, you're whatever you're called, an anti-patriot or whatever, for not believing in that opinion wholeheartedly. It's like Joe Rogan says. He's like, that's some leftover monkey shit. It's the monkey that stands on top of the mountain and yells the loudest. Everybody will turn and look at them and pay attention, and that's truly what it is,
While Rogan's show can often be the loudest monkey, though.
Oh, yeah. Especially when
Kind
they
of
have,
funny how that ends
especially
up
when Alex
working out.
Jones is on there.
Yeah, or
It's like-
anybody that he tends to kind of put out there that's
Well,
more
I'm talking about the
kind of
volume, his voice.
So-
Yeah,
overbearing.
That's a fair point, and you don't think of like shows like that giving preferential treatment to different people, but when you really look at it, like it does happen, whether he does it on purpose or not. Like, I'm not here to say. I don't want to. I like listening to Joe because I feel like he's a good moderator. A lot of times, he tends to not go into things already leaning one side or the other. He will let people like speak their mind and speak their opinion about things. I base this almost solely on his conversations about aliens. So,
Yeah.
I mean, he you know what I mean? Like, he talks with Jeremy Corbell and then about, he'll tell you, like, I believe and all this other shit.
Which, being on your alien show taught me so much.
Oh, yeah.
No, really,
fire in the-
sincerely,
the
like,
fire-
no, because
fire
I
in
had
the
to
sky
go
one?
dive myself
Yeah.
into a lot of things, and I'm like, wow, so much of what I just was like, I didn't even pay attention to.
What's
so.
funny is that
I enjoyed
this,
it.
this stuff is being uncovered, and we're that close to saying that extraterrestrials are real, ETs are real, and yet there's not mass hysteria. This, whatever's going on right now, is taking over, and that's kind of boggles my mind. In a
Well,
way.
yeah, because they just released. The Pentagon had the CIA had so many days to release all the information they had categorized on UFOs due to a Freedom of Information Act request. So they released them early, and Jeremy Corbell went through and he was like, "Let me make this straight." He goes, "Let me qualify this for everybody. The Freedom of Information Act does not include classified or off-the-table programs and things like that.
Which would make perfect sense, yeah.
Which is where, like, it doesn't make, in all the documents that they release, there's no mention of ATIP, which we know is a thing, because, like, they released, Lou Elizondo came out, and, like, all of these things, like, they have admitted that these were programs, but there's no mention of them in any of these documents because they're like, black ops off-the-table kind of, program. So the Freedom of Information Act doesn't have anything to do with it. And besides, anything worthwhile is usually redacted out of there anyway.
Black lines and
black highlighter.
the the one page the
Plain flying.
Got it. Yes.
one period, whole thing black a period.
So I've kind of broken this segment out into 5 sections, talking about. Let's just dive into section number 1. Let's start 4 years ago and go over Trump's campaign promises. Let's talk about what got him into the White House to begin with. So there was a lot of things that politicians promised on the campaign trail, and I always find it fascinating to see like what they stick with through their term, and where things shift once they get into office, and do they stay true to their campaign promises or do they not? The top things that that Trump promised, and mind you, there was a lot of things that he promised that he made good on. The top 5 things, and I forgot to make a note of where he stood on these now, but like let's just see where we can get over there. So number 1, he promised to repeal Obamacare, which he did not.
Nope.
Yeah.
I think that he's trying to get close, but without having a plan in place to take its place, you're putting millions of Americans out of health care. So I think that was kind of...
And they tried it 2 ways. McCain sunk them in the Senate, and because I think it made it through the House, sunk in the Senate, and then the second way was they were going to end up suing, but I don't think that actually ended up didn't make it through, or they realized that they weren't going to be able to replace it with anything.
So let me ask you a question, political correspondent Cris Hernandez. Why, since Obama instilled Obamacare with an executive order, why couldn't Trump repeal it with an executive order?
Well, the ACA is actually passed by both the House and the Senate. It's law.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Affordable Care Act is law. Now, parts of it have been dismantled over time. So there has been like the mandate finally got dropped. Parts of the way that they understood the tax, if I remember exactly the way the Supreme Court decided that one kind of got changed to some degree, but they upheld most of it.
When you say the mandate got dropped, so like you can't be penalized for not having...
From what I remember, yes, that's true. I'd have to go back. Obviously, this has been some time since I've kind of stood on. No, and it's okay. But these are things that if this had been during his administration, I mean, I was reading the court cases as they came and dropped, and we were always kind of just watching it. So, but for the most part, as far as I understand, the mandate was the only thing, and then of course the Supreme Court upheld the ACA based on it being a tax. So that's kind of what's held it. And that's why it's kind of very hard to get rid of it, so to speak.
One of the things that I'd be interested to hear like y'all's opinion on this. One of the things that I thought that was really good that the Affordable Care Act did was get rid of pre-existing conditions. And I know that there was, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was some kind of like push to bring those back or repeal that part of the law, like so that insurance companies could start like denying coverage for pre-existing conditions.
It's I was gonna say that's an interesting thing. So this would have been Paul Ryan's Congress basically before he left. So I think that was the first 2 years of Trump's presidency, if I'm right. So he's a Speaker of the House at that time. I know that they had attempted to push through their own. It wasn't I don't think they called it the affordable. I forget what they called it. They had a name for it. They tried to push it through. I know that was one of the Democrat talking points, but as to what that really looked like, put it this way, I'm sure there was a roundabout way of probably removing those protections, in which case maybe to somewhat enshrine it. But I will say that's where Trump, these are the moments where he does kind of listen to some degree. And I think his advisors kind of were like, don't do that. That's not going to be good. And you need to. And so those were those instances where he would push back on his own party because that was something that they were largely against.
Not forget that, like, this entire party this is one of the things that really has gotten me over the past 4 years. The Republicans were almost 100% against Trump since the beginning.
Yeah. His
whole campaign run, and he was like, fuck you guys, I'm doing it anyway. Everybody was so surprised that they actually gave him the nomination.
And his most ardent supporters now, like especially Ted Cruz.
Oh, that's hilarious.
He personally insulted Ted Cruz's
His
wife.
mother,
Yes.
I wish his mother, his father, and his wife.
And Ted Cruz can't get Trump's dick in his mouth.
No, yes. Or deep enough.
And so this is interesting. I mean, which reek. I love that's what I call him. He's reek to me. He's reek.
Yeah, for sure.
So exactly, there you go.
Exactly.
He's Theon, and he's
Theon,
lost the name.
yes.
He does not know his name anymore. It's Reek. But
Yeah,
I guarantee
I like that.
you, somewhere around maybe this next year, once he licks his wounds after this insurrection, I think you'll start to see him remember his name again, and kind of begin to push back on some of the MAGA stuff.
He has no choice.
Ted Cruz has any chance of winning re-election after
I don't think so.
You know what? You'd be surprised. Here's the thing. What that looks for in terms of the Democrats, I don't know, because it seems like in Texas they just still haven't gotten it together.
Oh, the Texas Democrats?
Yeah, they still just have not gotten it together.
Texas is a very,
Well, it's been
right?
going to purple, but the thing is, like, you can even talk about Houston. There's a lot of suburb districts that, I'm telling you, you could look at numbers, just raw numbers, and say that Democrat's going to win. I mean, or at least it looks like almost assuredly they're going to win, and it didn't happen.
Where were you at with Beto? Do you think he was going to win it?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, Beto was only a few points away. I mean,
exactly.
he brought some red counties, or not counties, but rather particular districts and stuff, because you can go to counties and you can look at congressional districts. But I mean, I'm trying to think of the one that's major. I think it's Tarrant. There's one up north, but essentially, that's been the trend. It's something that they had banked on. But I think that I think if we and again, this is very short, just kind of like what could I say right now off the top of my head. I think at the end of the day, when they go back and they look at it, the two things that really they messed up on was, one, they had hoped that the down ballot would be enough. So basically coattails from Biden, which I thought that's normal. That's usually the way politics works out. But the problem is the normal infrastructure that a presidential campaign will build, which means basically field operations, because they have the money, which is unique for this time because Democrats actually raised a crap ton of money in ways that they had never done before, especially House candidates, so local legislative candidates, in which case they didn't leverage it. All they did was they went to the airwaves, and guess what? We ended up finding out this actually was a good old ground game. You needed a ground game, and the Democrats just didn't want to play ball in the sense that they were worried about COVID. They didn't want to go out door to door, which understandably, I mean, I get it. But I think that's where Republicans, because they've built, man, guys, I'm telling you right now, after running races and being out there as long as I have, Republicans have an infrastructure that is so solid, it's stellar, it's a turnkey that if Democrats hope to compete, you've got to be able to do that. And that's just something they just have not been able to do, which means we're talking about Rotary clubs. We're talking about commerce chambers. We're talking about going to the churches. We're talking about your local whatever community things.
Yeah.
And they just cannot. They just can't do it. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just some sort of like mental block, or if they just think that they can leverage this kind of, I don't know, they feel like they're going to build a different kind of base, and they just don't. For me, it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of Texas, and they continue to do it.
Fair. So speaking of Texas, I'm just going to rattle off the top things that I feel like Trump promised on the campaign trail that he we'll just talk about where that. He promised to build the border wall and make Mexico pay for it.
I'm sorry.
He has partially built the border wall. Mexico did not pay for it.
Yeah.
He promised to suspend immigration from terror-prone countries. He did do that.
Yeah. I give him that.
And that was, whether that was...
Which that actually had a poetic justice into that, I think.
Yeah, it did.
Because now his supporters are on no-fly list and not going home. And that's actually how his administration started. There were people who were American citizens trapped in airports and could not get home and/or could not come home.
Exactly.
Ouch.
He did promise to cut individual taxes and reform the tax code, which he did lower taxes for the middle class, and he knocked out. He took the tax brackets from 9 to 5.
Yeah.
I think it was.
I don't know if I think the jury's out a little bit on the middle class taxes to some degree. I guess the measure of that, I don't think there's a whole lot of arguing in terms of what you got back in your check. But I think in terms of maybe what you lose on that or what's gained, that's kind of so basically who makes out, right? Who really got the benefit of that, which means that you might have gotten something that had been marginal versus maybe another particular kind of income bracket. So, I mean, that one, it's a grain of salt. I don't know. Will I?
One of those things like where they talk about tax cuts and you hear people, especially big business economists and stuff like that, talk about trickle-down economics and stuff all the time. But the trickle-down has never been proven to actually work or actually have happened, especially when Reagan instituted it back in the 80s. Like, that, they were like, yeah, we do, cut tax cuts for businesses and for the rich, then they'll have more money to spend on their employees.
Sure, supply
and
side
things like that.
economics,
Yeah, and it didn't work out that way, and that's how you end up with billionaires
Right.
like
Well, and again,
Warren Buffett and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's all that supply side.
Right.
economics.
And here's the thing. I told you guys coming on the show, trying to just be, pretty fair here.
Yeah,
and
for
so when it comes to the kind of a tax policy thing, like I said, are there marginal benefits? Sure. But then you're talking about what's the macro view? What does that really look like in terms of where is all that benefit going? To me, tax policy is like, it's like a balloon. If you grab it in a certain place, it's going to inflate somewhere else. So where you're reducing someone else, the burden's going somewhere. Whether that's headed to your deficit, which means that we don't have money to pay for things we need, which means we're incurring, right? It's just we're running in the red, which that's usually what occurs when they do tax cuts. That's really just we run in the red because of that. But then again, when we talk about is this money going in terms of churning innovation and people are hiring? I mean, there is to some degree some proof of this. It depends on the tax burdens. So again, put it this way. This is why between Democrats and Republicans, the answer is not. It's just tax cuts for the rich, or when we do tax cuts, it's for the middle class or whatever. It's tax cuts for the average man. In reality, it's nuanced and it never really is easy as they explain it.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if I know you've taken an economics class, and like I've taken a very, very, very easy economics class, and that was extremely hard.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff to grasp in there.
Sure.
A lot of money floating around, a lot of implications of who incurs the debt, who incurs the burden of this, and as it shifts, how business shifts around. That's a whole nother thing.
Well, what will happen, though? What will happen? The companies are going to get their own, regardless. Either they don't hire anybody, and it'd be limited fleet, or they just.
Well, and see, that's how it breaks down sometimes too. Like you might have large firms that are doing very well under tax cuts like that, but then small businesses aren't getting nearly what they need. So you may not. Again, you're helping. And again, without looking at all the data, but just off the cuff, what I can tell you about sometimes the way when you look at them in a large scale, that's sometimes what happens. Your kind of middling business really isn't doing as well with the tax cuts, whereas a multi-million billion-dollar industry, they're
which will happen
super good
if there is a minimum wage increase, which will happen. I mean, I don't know if that'll happen, but I'm talking about if that does happen, it's going to get to the point where the employee. Yeah, I know, but it'll hit the base of the company.
You can make a strong argument for minimum wage should have kept up with inflation like everything else, and that makes a fair point. But then you start getting into the politics of the parties about why do you keep the minimum wage low, and that's because you want to keep the poor.
That's a whole another. It's a whole segment. But
keeping rolling though, another thing that Trump did promise was to cut taxes for big business. Which he did. He did some business tax reform, not as much as he would like, I think, but he did. He did cut taxes for businesses, which I think was kind of selfish because I feel like he did that for himself, and not for for anybody else. And he also promised to take no vacations, which we all know did not happen. He is on vacation, I think, probably right now.
Yeah, I think.
Well, look, these were negotiating art of the deal kind of things. So
I saw him a couple times with his skimmies all the way up to his chest area golfing. No, I think
so our tax dollars paid for him to go golfing at his own private club that he owned. And he's the only president that owned private business that did not put it into a trust when he became president. He just shifted control of it to his kids.
Yeah, I enjoyed the explanations of that. Of course he did. I mean, I was just like, okay, you just don't fight these kinds of things.
No.
I think the toilet thing has been the funniest thing at the end of the day. This last little toilet scandal. Oh yeah. So apparently, Ivanka and Jared we're not allowing the Secret Service to use the restrooms in their home.
Oh, nice.
And they have this like massive home, right?
Yeah,
so
of
it's not like they don't have probably a servant's toilet, right? Yeah. So the Secret Service
The help
had
toilet? Is
the
that what you're
help toilet,
saying?
yes. The Secret Service had to rent an entire
Gotta be
property for $3,000 a month just to go use the pisser, just to use a John. So that's your tax dollars.
And so here's another.
That's
thing.
hilarious.
Here's another thing.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh at that. I mean, but geez,
Yeah.
it's just
It's
awful,
comical.
man.
It's awful.
I don't know what else to
comical,
tell you.
but,
It's comical.
one of the things that we also forget is that as Trump leaves the presidency, he gets a Secret Service detail
Yep.
for life, as well as his family.
$1 million in travel for a year, stipend per year. Yeah.
Which will all go to, I guarantee, an airline or something that he owns or owns stake in. So that's, and then stays at his own personal hotels that he owns, paying for himself to stay there. That, that's our tax dollars hard at work.
Yeah.
And I get it. I can almost hear someone out there in the ether like, well, every other president. Okay, yes, we know. Like every other president.
That's fine.
And look, every other president you hate. I was like all the presidents you hate, yes.
Jimmy Carter had a stroke and went back out to Habitat for Humanity.
I know, like the next day.
So,
God bless you, Jimmy Carter. And by the way, God bless Jimmy Carter. By the way, if you didn't know that, Jimmy Carter is the patron saint of, what do you call it, a craft beer.
Is he really?
Under his administration, this is when this particular about you making a
God
certain
bless
amount
him.
of beer, and that's what kind of supposedly broke off the whole.
Well, God bless Jimmy Carter.
That should be the ending of every.
Bless you, Rico.
Yeah, I was gonna say
God
that
bless
should be
you
the
guys.
ending of every
There you
presidential
go.
speech. God bless our troops. God bless
God
Jimmy
bless.
Carter.
God bless Jimmy Carter.
God bless Jimmy Carter.
So now, circling back to kind of what we were, like the original thing we were kind of talking about, controversy during his presidency. This may go down as one of the most controversial presidencies of any president that we've ever seen. And I made an outline for this episode, and I started to list off things that I wanted to make sure were good bullet points that we hit. I made it through 2, and then I was like, "There's way too many."
Based off these two, yeah.
Let's start with. Let's just hit the nail on the head with the big one. Swing for the fences and talk about Jeffrey Epstein. You know what I mean? This is probably one of the biggest controversies.
Yeah.
That has hit our shores in a long time. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I don't think we'll ever truly know the full scale of this.
That's true.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like especially like the controversy surrounding Jeffrey Epstein's death.
Yeah.
The fact that all of these politicians and famous people are denying ever having known him, even though there's photographic proof of them hanging out together on multiple occasions.
What if he was just like a leecher though? He just showed up and like.
Well, so there's been people who asked that like on Reddit and stuff like that in the past, and one of the things that I have found is that there's no like the pictures are the easy proof.
Yeah.
There's way more.
I would imagine so. Yeah.
Apparently, like there's people have like there's people that are like. Yeah, like there's personal hand addressed notes from Trump to Epstein, signed checks, things like that. And we don't need to get into the whole Epstein, like what that was all about. I mean, it was about the Illuminati and.
Well, I was going to say the Epstein thing kind of gives us our first taste of some of this pretzeling. That's what I like to call this now.
Yeah.
Because I've heard from the supporters, when. And this is again ear to the ground, not no accusatory, not oh yes he just listening. Yeah. It turned from we knew Epstein that of course because of the whole pedo ring stuff like that because they're really into this right now. Yeah. And then it turned into then it turned into well Trump infiltrated. That was like this has been his mission for like 30 some years
to
infiltrate to get in the ring and then eventually and so like when I hear something like that I'm like okay, like wow, like I mean so just anything that we in the hand is just somehow him turning it into some way he's going to do something about it. Like,
Yeah,
I don't even know what to say about it anymore. But anyways, that's our first little trip to this. That's our first trip into this kind of conspiracy thing, because that really, when that came out, that was almost immediately 180, because, you know, the pictures came out and that video of him dancing and leaning into his ear, which they, you know, they'll play that over and over. Some of that creepy stuff he's done with Giuliani where he's cross-dressing and he's smelling on him and kissing him. And like, there's some weird, like, and that stuff's from forever.
Well, and that's,
you know,
I mean, honestly, like, if everybody in this country took a step back and looked at themselves and really asked themselves the question, if you were, and I get this from, like, I watch a lot of, like, crime drama shows, so this is where all my psychology is based on.
My wife back there, she's just, like, so excited you said that. She's like, yes.
So, like, if you look at a person who is super powerful in their everyday life, typically, sexually, they do not want to be in charge. They want to be dominated or taken over or give up that power and feel a sense of,
submission,
submissive, and be dominated to a certain extent. A lot of high-end hookers say, in interviews and stuff like that, like Heidi Fleiss in her memoir or whatever, talks about some of the high-end clientele that she had, and that's what they were into.
Like the BDSM password shit, like, I'm not releasing you.
And I mean, if you really think about it, like, all these people, like, if you're at the top of the world with no consequences and everybody's doing everything and you've got dirt on everybody, so, like, you might as well jump in the party, you know what I mean? Because everybody, if you don't, they're going to make up dirt on you. It's like it's like in that movie, The Skulls, basically.
Oh, yeah, The Skulls, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Joshua Jackson and
yeah.
the guy that died.
Why is that a good movie? I'm sorry to
It's
say
all right.
that.
You
No,
got
it's
Craig
like,
T. Nelson in there.
I know, but it's like, yeah, maybe that's what it is. Like Paul Walker.
Paul Walker, the guy.
And
like the guy that died.
Yeah, and by the way, that's like one of Paul Walker's like best films. It really is.
Yeah,
you know,
Katie Holmes was in it. Oh, that's Dawson's
I don't
Creek.
remember. Yeah.
My bad.
Who was the love interest?
Oh yeah, who was she?
I fucking forget.
Oh
Saw
God,
him a couple times. It was all right. It was decent.
It was
no, what I mean to say is it's supposed to be like a silly like teen,
no, but that movie,
but
like,
it,
exposed
yeah, but it actually has like a really good kind of action. And I'm like, I just remember watching that. I'm like, we're really watching a Dawson's Creek star movie, and I'm actually kind of like, this is kind of a thriller. Coach is in there,
There you go.
And Caleb, that's right, because Paul Walker's Caleb.
Caleb, pretty boy.
So, speaking of Epstein, we go into like all the sexual harassment suits against Trump and all of the recorded quotes of him saying things and doing things that are just like inexplicable for somebody who's been elected president. I mean, they were.
That did not start the Me Too movement, did it?
No.
No. Okay.
Harvey Weinstein.
That one. Okay. Gotcha.
But I mean, it was real easy when Trump is coming out and telling he's grabbing people by the pussy. You know what I mean? And they have him on tape saying it. I mean, you can't really deny it. I don't think he ever really like addressed it. He just kind of ignored it.
No, well, no. I mean, that's where you had Kellyanne Conway, and see, seriously, this has been the brilliance. I mean, and I want to say brilliance. Watch everyone at home is like, that's just how we show you. Yeah. But this is the political way where most people up until this point politically, that's the kind of stuff where shut up, get out of the limelight for a bit, and just call it a day and come back once everybody forgets about it. He said, screw that. I'm going full on, and I'm not apologizing about it. Actually, we'll rationalize it. And matter of fact, the rationalization of that was everybody does it.
It's guy talk.
We all talk like that. Don't worry about it. It's okay. I mean, it was just, like, I remember there was a clip.
I like Trump.
Really. And these are the things where like, and so I remember watching a clip recently, and it took me back, remembering like sitting there going, oh my God, we're about to jump off a cliff. Like there's going to be no return from here. It was a clip where it was like CNN, and they were just, it's one of those big panels, and they're all yelling at each other. And one of the kind of conservative people was yelling at a lady named Navarro. She's a Republican who turned, anti-Trump. And the lady's like, she actually starts repeating, grab him by the, and she's like, ma'am, my daughter is what, and it's like, but you're defending the man. who's saying this, but you're saying that nobody should say it on like, what in the world is happening here? Like, you could tell this weird thing was happening.
Yeah.
And I just, like, you almost don't know how to, because the thing about it is, though, we've been in this for a long time. I really, watching the Tea Party forum, as I was part of the Tea Party when it first formed, I was at the very first Tea Party in Houston.
Oh, nice.
And I actually recorded, I went out and interviewed people that day. And so I actually have this tape, it's somewhere, and it's wild, because you can hear the way people were talking then is very much the QAnon stuff you hear now. But it's wild to know that whatever that was that came under Obama, somehow where it was really about certain ideals began to morph and take shape in a cult of personality. And then it wasn't so much about ideas anymore. It was just about this man. Mm-hmm. And it's wild how that morphed so quickly. I mean, it was like clockwork. We're talking about almost 6 or so years of a movement that it only took maybe from 2015 to the day he was elected to essentially morph into something that is just him. I mean, no matter what, if I spend the rest of my life studying political science, that is something that I just cannot, wow.
That's interesting. To me, as an average American that stays, I pay attention to the political things that directly affect me. And whether you call that selfish politics or being a selfish American, that's my right, and that's what I choose. I choose the things that I feel affect blue-collar workers, things that I feel affect Medicaid, because I have a daughter that is on Medicaid and Medicare or whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't even know the difference between the two. I'm just going to,
one's old, one's
whatever, Medicare, whatever we have. Things that affect insurance and things like that. And things that I think are just outright unfair, I will tend to gravitate towards things like that. But the minutia of things, I try to, I don't actively try to, but I feel like I can have an opinion on it, but it doesn't really matter what my opinion is. I will vote one way or the other, and you try to make the best decision you can. But I feel like we ended up into this circus of reality TV politics with all these controversies that were coming up. I mean, me and Jake were talking before you got here. How what is the office of the president about? You know what I mean? Being that person, being the president, it had a certain dignity to it, and every president upheld that dignity of office, whatever. And
it's gone through highs and lows, There's been
a lot of embarrassing things. Clinton embarrassed the office, yes, but the way that he approached it,
but he's a guy,
was totally different.
Like, I could tell you a story about Jackson. This is a great story about Jackson. Jackson gets elected, and so he's essentially kind of a prototypical Trump to some degree. He was this kind of big populist, as it were, right. And so they end up having this drag out party in the White House. It gets so bad that they're rolling drums of beer, and these people are breaking things, and if I remember the story right, he actually gets almost his ribs cracked. They have to spirit Jackson out of this party. Essentially, the White House gets completely taken over by essentially this mob celebrating his victory. So it's this isn't it's just kind of, we've had people that have kind of animated people to such a degree that things kind of get out of hand,
but they weren't recorded on the internet.
No, and see, this is, and we'll talk about that. That's a big deal. It's a big deal.
But a lot of these things that have happened been such a big deal had it not been for the internet. It's kind of like a Schrodinger's cat kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't really know. We'd have to look at it. But one of the things that was national television, and I was asking Jake, I was like, I don't understand how this wasn't the end of his presidency, and this was a long time ago. At the beginning of his presidency, when he made fun of that handicap guy in his speech, how the hell was that not the end of his presidency?
And Rob, that's another one of those he didn't do that. That's not what happened.
Yeah,
I know.
But there's justification on why
they went out there, and it was a constant, and you could hear people say that he did not do that. That's another liberal. It's just because at some point it's we're not even talking about it anymore. Really, there's not even. See, this is the problem. We lost some sort of shared truth here, and when I say shared truth, it doesn't mean, put it this way. There's a difference between identifying whether or not I've moved my hand and we all saw my hand move, and then whether or not we can determine whether I did that, I don't know, I'm sitting here making fun of him or something,
Exactly.
right? There is a way that we might gain meaning from something happening, but clearly we all saw something happen. We can't even agree something happened, right?
Exactly.
Like, screw the meaning. We don't, like, the meaning doesn't even happen. We're not even talking about whether or not we can identify something that happened.
It's so black and white
Yeah.
that
And that should scare a lot of people, actually.
It does. It
should.
It's like if the Republicans say something happened, the Democrats say that's not true. It never happened. And the Democrats say this happened. They did this, and the Republicans say, oh, that never happened. They're just attacking us. And it's a constant back and forth. And as an average American, you struggle, and I can see how people would struggle to keep up with, like, what is the truth of the day. And so it becomes this constant fight, this back and forth, this, like, what is the actual truth, and then you start noticing that the word fact takes on a different meaning, and it's like, well, that's your fact. Well, no, a fact is a fact.
Yeah, well,
It is not an opinion-based fact. It's not a skewed side fact. It is this is the fact. Like, we are talking about. Like tonight, these things that I pulled on this outline for tonight are not opinion-based things. I mean, these are things that came straight off of Trump policy, laws that were signed, things like that.
And they've begun to call this the post-truth era. It's actually got a name now.
Wow, post-truth.
Yeah. And I Rob, you said it twice now, and I want to make sure that I address it, because I think a lot of people, it's hard to come to grips with it. But the truth of the matter is, you're not going to know everything. You talk about someone. I mean, I've been studying this stuff since I was like 15, 14 years old. My grandma took me to, like, voting sites when she was a judge. We're talking about since I was a kid, and I have an undergrad. I'm finished my master's. I'm probably gonna get I think I'm gonna go into a PhD program. I'm thinking about applying,
nice.
but it's like, you could talk about all the years that I've spent reading and reading and reading and talking and going out and running for office or whatever have you. Man, I still don't know. I still have to, you imagine the everyday person taking care of the kids, making sure the bills are paid, going to get groceries, right? And they really do. And that's the problem. And the other thing is, though, is that I think what's sad for a lot of voters is that it's hard to be honest with yourself and realize you really are ignorant. Not in the way that you're ignorant. No, ignorant, just like literally you just don't know.
No, don't know.
And became a four-letter word at some point.
Well, that too. And then and then so the other part, though, is that in that ignorance, right, that you really sometimes can't qualifiably make a decision. So it does become easier to say,
Based off
well, I'm going to vote
experience, right?
red.
Because
I'm going to vote because, I've been doing that for years.
Exactly.
This is my team. I'm going to, and so you're really not, even though you could parrot maybe some of the key points or whatever have you, or maybe some of the things you heard, but for the most part, you're just not informed. And even some of the best of us aren't as informed as we could possibly be. Like, it's just almost impossible. Right. So there's kind of like,
and that's one of the things is, like, where do you get your facts from?
Well, that too, but I think America also, at the end of the day, with all of this that's happened, and taking this kind of step back when we're talking about trying to, decompress after what's happened, there's also another reality check that, it's okay to not know. Right, and you don't need to fill that in with "Yes, I do. I know exactly. I have a truth."
That's the problem, man.
You don't need to fill that in. You just, let's be honest. Sometimes you don't know, and that's okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
It's okay. And your neighbor, maybe y'all can help each other figure it out. And I'm not trying to have a kumbaya moment here, but there is something about there's an honesty we're not having with ourselves.
And that's exactly right.
And that's unfortunate.
And that's the whole thing. Is like I said, ignorance has become a four-letter word. Ignorance is not a bad thing.
It's not
inherently. Ignorance just means that you don't know. Now, if you want, being willfully ignorant,
now there's the one, right? I'm glad you said that. Being willfully ignorant is entirely different.
Being willfully ignorant is completely different. But if you were truly ignorant of something and you ask a question regarding it, and you are trying to learn and educate yourself, I think that the bigger problem nowadays is that it's very hard to disseminate exactly what truth you're getting. Because, like you said, like, we're in this post-truth era. Like, you can even go on the internet and Google something, and, like, you may come up with a website. Let's take vaccinations, for example. Like, let's just plain vaccinations.
Yeah.
You can go out there and Google vaccinations and find all of this information, and saying, X, Y, and Z, this is the science behind it. but there's also stuff that says the complete opposite of
Yeah.
it. And so what? And you know, the arguments are very compelling, but because you are not those arguments that are compelling against that refute the science. The reason that they sound so compelling is because you don't really understand the science.
Yeah.
You're ignorant of the science behind it. So what you should be doing and what the general public should be doing is instead of lying to yourself and telling yourself that you understand these things, like that's why we have specialized degrees. That's why we have scientists. That's why we have oncologists. That's why we have cardiologists. That's why we have all of these doctors and people that study these things for years and years and years and really understand on a macro and micro level how all of these things work. You have to trust the consensus of the community that you're asking of that and say, I don't really get this. Like, what do y'all think?
Right.
Well, here's our consensus. 9 out of 10 of us or 8 out of 10 of us say that this is truth. Okay. What about the other 2 out of 10? Well, they have another opinion. Okay. Like, you're welcome to your own opinion. You can side with them, you can side with us. But for the most part, people will listen to the majority. Okay, these, this is 800,000 scientists say this.
Right. Well, and this is the true casualty of this kind of post-truth era, really, because it's actually not a singular thing.
Right,
We've kind of thought that it really just revolves around politics. No, it's actually our institutions in general, and I mean institutions, both religious institutions. It's
system.
our government institutions. Yeah. It goes down even family to some degree. Yeah. So our informal institutions are also losing this certain trust. That's why we're at such a unhealthy. I'm afraid to go so far as to say, clutch your pearls and prepare because we're really getting to the kind of end times, as it were. But we've been here. This has happened. This is quite cyclical. As someone who teaches history, we do see this. But the thing about it is, though, and this kind of goes back to this internet thing, to the level that it can almost be so repetitive and the frequency at which you're constantly bombarded. That's something not seen. I mean, it's insane. I mean, you're constantly being kind of bombarded with these things that are having you question in the sense that may not be in that kind of positive light, right? Yeah. It's in the service of diminishing something, because it actually is trying to actually harm these institutions.
Yeah. And so I want to kind of go.
Well, before you get into that,
go ahead.
I was going to say it goes down to like the belief system that us humans have. We have a sheep herd mentality. Religion, just because they don't believe, it goes to belief. Like they may not, the science is there back in the vaccines, but they believe in something else, and it's always going to be that way.
Yeah, they believe Jenny McCarthy.
Yeah, but it also goes to there's a sheep herd mentality. Also goes with the like you said, like the Republicans didn't even want Trump in office initially, but now they kind of sway their ideas.
I don't think they did. I think they just sway the party.
That's where I'm getting at is why even have parties? Since when did liberals, conservatives become Crips and Bloods? You know what I mean?
That was I can correct me if I'm wrong, but this was Thomas Jefferson.
Yes, it's the monarchy. It's called it's the Revolution of 1800.
No, what I'm trying to get at is like, is it beneficial?
Washington and his exit speech, and when he left the presidency after 2 terms and set the precedence of a 2-term president, and we didn't have a law for this until
FDR.
48.
Yeah, it's after FDR dies in his 4th term, and then Truman.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean this as a literal question. I was just saying in general, like, would it be beneficial at all to not have a party system?
Yeah, it would be.
And that's probably the direction we probably would need to take.
How would you would have so many differing opinions?
Well,
and that's the whole thing is parties coalesce the opinions,
but it's also steer them to the just tunnel vision.
Well,
ideas.
I mean, your question has a general answer, and it's actually just because the Constitution, because of the way that we are. It's what they call single member districts, right? So basically, you have a primary, right? Any number of parties could compete as it were. But for the most part, the two parties that generally win all the votes are two parties. So you're going to get a winner take all. So it almost you coalesce into almost two competing parties just by the nature of the way that our party system works. So basically, if you had a parliamentary system, then you would still have parties,
right,
but it would be far more, right? It'd be poly. You'd have many, many parties, just like you see it. And so even the smallest kind of voting block could have some sort of kind of membership, some voice in the membership.
It would be more blended.
It would be a lot more blended, but I mean...
But you vote for a party.
Yeah.
Right.
The party appoints the
But
person.
But I would say that doesn't mean that your parties are not a blend of, right? They are large coalitions, right? They're formed of many different. That's why when they go to platform committees, which I know if my friends that have, both in the Republican and Democrat Party who work very hard, and I love you guys, so let me not knock y'all. But you know what I'm talking about. When they go to these platform committees, oh my God, they will be sitting there and adding planks. And if you read any platform, I don't care whether it's a Democrat one or the Texas or any state, these things are just mounds of we believe blah, and none of this stuff is ever. Nobody reads it.
Right.
Nobody. I mean, I hate to say it. Nobody really cares. Maybe it turns into kind of a political fodder, but it's a way for all of these particular groups within the parties to express what they want, and
it's a badge on their coat.
Yeah, it is, and it's also it gives you buy-in from the party. The party's putting it on the plank to say that they believe in it too, and so yes, there is a sense that you would be worried about all these different kind of groups and whether or not they're represented and why we only have two parties, but it really is just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, but if you listen to like the speeches back in the 80s, it seemed like these parties shifted dramatically. If you listen to the speeches of the Democrat Party and the Republican Party back in the 80s, 70s, it was a little less radical than what it is today. So it seems like we kind of steered off those moral backgrounds and kind of just got straight tunnel vision.
Remember when I've talked about this before on the podcast?
Tell me a wow factor, please, sir.
This is a post 9/11 world.
Good point.
And that was the turning point.
Yeah, that's true.
The fear of a repeated 9/11 and of terrorism has driven the politics of our day, and that's where everything hinges and pivots on that.
Yeah, we did enter into a different era. I mean, I feel like, what is it? Adam destroys whatever that guy, because it's to some degree you're right, but the thing about it is though, and I'm glad Rob brought that up, because the election between Jefferson and Adams is notoriously horrible. I mean, to the point where they're basically calling Adams essentially a hermaphrodite. They say Jefferson is sleeping with his African, of course they use a different word, but they basically say he's sleeping with his slaves. They call him the philosopher cock. Like, you should see these pictures, because I show these political cartoons to my kids.
Nice.
But I mean, it's like you really get a sense that kind of hyperbole, that kind of extremism that we've seen, it's been there. It really has.
It's always been there.
And like I said, referencing back to George Washington, like in his conceded speech when he left office, I mean, he warned against the two-party system, saying that it would eventually lead to concrete political ideals and a black and white system in a very much gray world. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing now. I mean, honestly, people criticize the United States for things like that, but if you really look at it, you really want to take a swing at it. I mean, we're a fairly young country.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, country, you want to compare us to other countries and stuff like that. Like, they've been through multiple civil wars, multiple uprisings, of
revolutions.
Things,
yeah, absolutely.
Revolutions, things like that, and we haven't had that, and we've always put ourselves out there as being better than these countries because of that. But it is still one of those things that it is. I mean, we are still a young country.
Well, and that's. I mean, and not to get into this kind of American exceptionalism, but that actually is what makes us the greatest country in the world, is that we have a process for power and changing hands, and we do it peacefully.
We used to do it peacefully. We used to do it peacefully.
But there is a sense that is something that has been very unique. The Republic has existed. I mean, this is something that when we go even to the Federalist Papers, and you can read our founding fathers even earlier, there were constant republics can't be this big. You can't hold together a national government like this. This will never last. It was just a constant kind of berating of the way that they thought maybe we can put this together. And I mean, these guys read everybody, Montesquieu, Locke, Rousseau. I mean, they wrote, read all of the Enlightenment thinkers and the French philosophers. And so there's the Greeks, there's so much that's rolled into what our country is. And that's another thing. It's like this lack of understanding that, when you're out there, whether you're waving the MAGA flag or you're standing and you're swinging around your communist flag and your Antifa stuff, little to nothing of really the greatness or rather the foundation of centuries, right? Millennia that this country is built upon to get here, like the evolution that's required for a republic like this to sustain itself and last and to be this successful. I want to use profanity here, but if this is, you know what I mean? Like as me, basically forget you in that instance. Like you really are, you're missing out on so much. Like it's beyond you. Your little problem that you have today in terms of the continuity of this government and what we pass down, right, to posterity is far more important, right, than the fact that you want to just burn stuff down, right, and have your fit. Right. And that's kind of this thing where we really haven't gotten to this kind of adult sense. Right. We have been into some serious adolescent crap lately. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And people put your big boy pants on. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah. And this is a whole other discussion. What I would like to do is I feel like.
Yes. I'm sorry.
I want to make sure that we're not shitting on Trump the whole time. Because for as many things,
which I think I've been fair.
I think we've tried to be as moderate as possible, but I mean there will be.
Well, I'll do the shitting for you.
That's fine. Right. So what I would like to do is I'd just like to go hit some of the high points of things that Trump got right, because there was a lot of policy that he did pass that he did get correct. Now, whether that was his idea or it was in the works coming from the previous administration, Now, let me rephrase what I'm saying. What did he get right is not what I meant to say, because this list is more of what did Trump accomplish?
Yeah, I would say maybe accomplish.
It is wholly to be seen whether or not he did this right or not. So let me rephrase how I'm saying that.
What's a good way of putting it?
This is the things that Trump accomplished, and I'll leave the big one for last. First thing, he established a Space Force. Now, whether you want to admit if that's a good thing or a bad thing, like I said,
Space Force.
It's laughable now, but you never,
Hey, look, man.
Do you think there's an android robot or android doctor? I'm sorry, in the Space Force.
He also did.
I like how he just ignored me. I like the way he just ignored me. God damn
it. He did a lot of tax reform. We kind of hinted on that earlier. He signed into law the First Step Act, which was really big for prison reform in this country. It's the first step into it was very small, minute steps, but it is a step in the right direction, and it gets the ball rolling on future legislation for prison reform in this country. We forget that under his command, we did defeat the ISIS Caliphate, and we killed their number one. I'm gonna fuck this guy's name up. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi.
Which he has a warrant out for his arrest.
Well,
or
I was
death
going to
warrant,
say,
right?
well, that's Soleimani. That's
Soleimani.
That's Iranian.
Sorry.
But the question of the caliphate is a little because they're still bombing parts of North Africa, fighting.
We removed
No.
The caliphate from existing in the major way that it did at the time. They were taking over whole countries. We successfully evicted them from the major cities that they were controlling, which was a big thing. I mean, that's. I mean, whether you want to admit it, whether or not he had anything to do with it or not, it doesn't matter. The leader gets the credit.
Oh yeah, this is how this is how you get when the stock market goes up, and you also get it when it goes down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There was a huge reduction in coal burning and legislation to reduce coal burning during Trump's presidency, and wind energy has actually overtaken coal energy for the first time in American history under Trump's presidency. He did spear point the control of 5G networks to keep them out of the control of foreign foreign interests, specifically
like
China.
Huawei. Yeah.
Now, whether or not, whether that is his own paranoia behind that, yet to be seen. But I mean, I think that the proof is in the pudding of kind of things that have been proven coming out of China, that I think it's better mandated control and away from that, and more in a trust and national control than that. One of the things that that I think is really good is he sped up the generic drug approval process. So the FDA has a process for approving generic drugs to the market, and that process can be long and cumbersome for a lot of drug manufacturers, driving up the cost of generic drugs to people. So he did speed up that approval process by passing some legislation. He also, one of the things that he from both sides has been touted on as a quote-unquote good move was appointing Jerome Powell as the Federal Reserve Chair. And that's another economics thing, and the implications of which we will see, coming down the line in the next few years as policy has been, implemented by him. One of the more controversial things that he did that we will also see the implications of coming down is repealing NAFTA, and trying to implement a new trade agreement between, so that was more fair to the United States.
Yeah.
Because we did absorb a large brunt and burden of that, and because of that repealing of NAFTA, we did create a lot of manufacturing jobs here in the United States and things like that. And of course, Chris and I were talking about this, and right before we went on, the big thing is the appointment of all the federal judges that he did, which is, like you said, is going to shape the judiciary in this country for the next 20 years, probably. 3 Supreme Court conservative Supreme Court justices and 220 federal judges, all appointed to lifetime appointments.
How's that accomplishment?
That for somebody as a president, that you're asking, how is that a good accomplishment? It is an accomplishment. He did do that. No. Therefore, he accomplished that.
Okay.
It is done.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, put it this way.
I guess you're right, yeah.
In terms of Trump, did he really have put it this way, was that something he probably cared about? Not really. Right. Maybe the number and being able to say, I did it. Yeah. Greatest ever. Nobody's like, for sure. Yeah. That's what he gets out of it. Nobody does federal judges like me. But, in terms of that was really a alley-oop between him and Mitch McConnell, because that was him pushing it through, holding down, really in control of the Senate. But the reason that really is an accomplishment is because if you start to think about federal cases that are going to then go through the courts, moving their way up to the Supreme Court, so Court of Appeals, that sort of thing. So there's a whole this kind of federal circuits and stuff. This essentially controls in terms of questions of things that'll be constitutional, things that the states are doing. So when another party sues people with or some state action, they take it to these federal courts, whether or not the courts are going to end up striking this stuff down, holding it, maybe not hearing it. So there is a lot that's a huge win for conservatism in the sense that, and this is why I say, because Trump really has no ideology, but what is going to work for him, right? He's very much in the people would know if they hear this, some people would, but he's a Thrasymachus in Plato's Republic, right? His mind is right. Whatever's going to work and it's doing well, boom, that's it. I don't care if I'm winning, I'm winning. So at the end of the day, conservatism, he doesn't care. But in terms of, because it really is a group. The Federalist Society, a lot of them pushed through these because they already had these judges ready to go. They already had them selected. They've already vetted them. Boom, let's go. So they're pushing them through. That's why they were so quick at it. I mean, they really knew what they were doing, and so
and there were elections. There were local elections and stuff that could have overturned the power of the Senate and the House, and they didn't want to. They wanted to boom, boom, boom.
Well,
boom, boom,
I mean, they're smart. So I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, these are these things where you just can't help but go back and go, even though Trump had this really terrible ability to essentially burn anybody that he felt just didn't toe the line, these people really worked for him. Like, they got so much done for him that, So it's really sad because I mean a lot of people, I think at the end of the when he's out on his own, a lot of people are going to get burnt in a way that I don't think they're ready for. Because I will tell you right now, his last chef's kiss at the end was making sure that Georgia was making sure Mitch McConnell lost his Senate.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I at the end of the day, I really do believe that Trump was basically sitting there with the popcorn going, "Yeah, baby. Yeah, that's right.
I'm out, you're out.
Yeah, you're out. Yep, I lose, you lose, because I don't care. You know, like that, and that's just kind of that. To me, that's the kind of man that he is.
So you bring up a good point. So let's transition into this last section, and this is the Trump's the election of 2020 and the transition of power. First on the list is Trump refusing to concede the election to Biden, which he still. Correct me if I'm wrong. He still has not done.
No.
He himself has not conceded.
No.
And which has never happened before. Typically, president, with the exception of Al Gore and George Bush, called for a recount, but when the recount came back the same, he did concede the election.
Yeah, and by the way, this is even with Gore having people behind him saying, "Don't you do that." Don't you do that. Even at the end of the day, even in 2016, there were people there with Clinton telling her the same thing. This was stolen. There were people that were right there right in her inner circle telling her not to concede. Don't be Gore. You go fight. And she, nope, it's over.
Now,
wow.
That's one of the things that leads me into the next point. The Trump and his supporters claim widespread election fraud. Wholly on the most part, we'll call it unproven, and I know that there's a lot of people that'll be like, there's plenty of proof, it's being covered up. That's the fun thing about conspiracy theories. You don't have to worry about proof. You just you have the ideal and anecdotal evidence, and you can come at it, and that's fine. I love conspiracy theories because it challenges your critical thinking skills, and it really makes you most of them make you really think about how your opinions are formed and things like that. But I mean, in a case like this, like where you're talking about in key swing states, the claim is that Democrats were throwing away ballots that were Trump ballots to make sure that they didn't get counted, even though there was no proof of it. I mean, I don't know where Trump got his information on that. Like if he was on Reddit and saw it, or like somebody tweeted it to him. Well, I don't mean to say that. Like
no.
I'm genuinely curious about where that came from, because there wasn't there was like a couple of like news reports of it, but then the news reports. Almost all of them even redacted that and were like, there's no real proof of this. It's all
because before the night was over, he was winning. And I guess overnight.
Yeah, I mean, I think this.
The night wasn't even over.
It was not, because they hadn't finished counting.
They were still it was still very, very neck and neck. And he was like, "Stop the votes! I win! I pulled ahead by 10 votes.
Yeah.
After this, and it's all over."
Yeah. I love that kid when you used to play games, right? You knew that person, right? Stop now that you're winning right now.
Like,
not when I, yeah. But here's the thing. I think the power in the conspiracy theory, though, and by the way, look, I won't, fine. You believe it. I mean, at this point, I can't fight with you anymore. I don't have energy to sit here and go for one. That's fine. Clearly, what's going to happen on the 20th is going to happen, and I guarantee you, it's not what you think.
Allegedly,
unless it's like that thing I posted recently that it's going to be like a face-off thing, and it's really going to be Trump, but it's in Biden's body. Yeah, that's this new one. But here's the thing: the problem with what's happening here, and this is the problem that's happened. What's the genius of what Trump has done? Trump can take kernels of truth, things that we commonly know, like things are corrupt. Everyone knows things are corrupt. Like that's not you're not teaching us anything. That elections can sometimes have fraud. Yes, we know that. Like everyone knows that some form of like. It's not widespread. It's probably not enough to adjust anything that happens, but on point. And you can go into this. I mean, I guarantee you, I could open up right now an academic. We can open up JSTOR, and I can show you thousands of studies that have been done. It's basically it's an academic depository. So if you go into college, you're always going on there and reading research papers, but basically research papers for social science. And so there are thousands upon thousands of people who have studied this, constantly marginal. It's not that kind of fraud, just isn't what you think it is. But because it may exist and you could capture just a piece of that, and when you run with it and you make it this bigger truth, it's hard to dispel because you can't. It's one of those ones like, when did you stop beating your wife? You know, when they like, you know, I never like, you know, clearly you must have like, you know, so it's one of those things where, so it's an interesting thing, you know, I haven't, right? I haven't.
That's the same
what do you mean?
thing.
So no, and it's one of these things where it's kind of assuming this truth, you know, it's assumed in the proposition that there is fraud. Right.
Yeah,
and so it's hard to dispel. You cannot say no to this.
That was one of the, you know, Trump thing Trump ran on. I'm going to drain the swamp. You know what I mean? And that leads into like the last. We have one more, you know, point before that. You know, these. Well, you know what? We'll get into this first, and then we'll kind of lead into the last
sure.
of the night. So. Trump ran on this platform of, you know, I'm going to go in and drain the swamp. I'm a man of the people, for the people, you know, and, you know, he was going to go in there.
That Arnie fucking, it sounded like Arnie.
It was kind of like a Mayor Quimby.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah,
Quimby. I love Quimby. Yeah.
I got you. That is Quimby.
It was kind of like a Quimby fake Trump thing.
I love Quimby, dude.
Yeah, Quimby was great.
So, you know, it's one of those things, and Quimby is like a
JFK, yeah, the Chada.
Yeah. So, anyway, the conspiracy theories that I hear, and I don't hear all of the conspiracy theory, but I hear, you know, bits and pieces of it, and I don't research anything. So this is like just me reading.
Just like everybody else that has a big opinion about things.
This is me, just like every other, just like all the boomers on Facebook, reading exactly what I see. Reading exactly
it is the boomers, dude. There's a couple millennials there.
So, okay, sure. But the stories that I hear, you know, the stories that I see, are, you know, basically to this point, you know, that Trump was there to drain the swamp. That he lost the election due to widespread election fraud, right? But like he was brought in from the beginning by the military.
I love this one. This is good.
It's good. And they were waiting for them to steal the election from him, so that they would have the proof they needed to instill martial law and send all of these people in the Senate and the House, all these professional politicians. They would have the proof they needed on paper to send them to jail and drain the swamp permanently. And since there would be nobody there to take power, it would be Trump would have to stay in office for another 4 years or however long to make sure that there's, you know, martial law is instilled and, you know, we could, you know, have a free and fair election and get, you know, new non-corrupt politicians in there. Now, I'm not saying that politicians aren't corrupt because we all know, that's, like you said, that's a widespread truth. Whether or not it's every politician or not, it's a widespread truth. So that's the theory that I hear. I see them all the time, you know. Just wait, folks. It's playing out like a movie script.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just wait. It's not over yet.
Which is hilarious because one of the QAnon writers is actually a failed Hollywood. Writer.
There's a Donnie Darko.
So it's hilarious, right?
So this whole conspiracy brings me into obviously the biggest thing that's happened, and there's this big riot at the Capitol, and we see on the news, you know, the guards letting these people in. We see these fucking retards taking selfies of themselves and getting their pictures all over the place, and now they're, due to Trump's own laws, facing 10 years in prison.
Yeah, that's another poetic justice thing.
Yeah.
Jeez, you just can't beat them.
These are the
and you know,
you're special. I love you.
Yeah, we're very special. We love you.
Now, one of the things about that is, so there's one of the things that I brought up to Jim was, you know, the left calls the right fascist. Mm-hmm. They call Trump Hitler, and they compare him to the Nazi rise to power. And then the right calls the left the same thing.
Yeah.
For different reasons, you know. So I'll go over some of the bullet points, the highlight reel for you here. So the right calls the left, compares them to the Nazis due to cancel culture, and not, you don't agree with what I say and what my opinions are, then you don't get to see shit. They on Twitter, Facebook, all the social media sites, cancel culture. I don't care. 10 years ago you said this, like, you're done. Like, this is the narrative that we want to project. This is this is what the left wants to project, basically, and everything else will be shut out. Very 1984. George Orwell's 1984.
Of course, the year.
Great movie.
We'll talk about that next episode, maybe.
Next episode. But the flip side of that is when you talk about like the what the liberals call the Republicans, and they're like Trump being Hitler, and all these comparisons to the Nazi Party, and like I was telling Jake, they had this.
Where are you now? I know.
Not a lot of people remember, or realize, like, when Hitler rose to power, there was a failed coup for him to overthrow the German government, because the German people were paying all these tax reparations to the rest of the world for them, it was basically to keep Germany poor for so many generations, because of their role in World War I.
The beer hall pooched.
So when you have this guy coming in that's very charismatic, and he's trying to get a hold on this party, and trying to he runs a coup to overthrow the government with the military, and they fail, and he actually spends 3, 4, 5 years in jail, which is where Hitler wrote Mein Kampf. And when he came out of jail, is when he really started gaining ground with people. And we talked about this when we were talking about The Boys. Everybody wants to hear that shit.
Yeah.
Until you hear it's Nazism. It's all, everybody wants to hear that shit until you put a label on it.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. And that's kind of the rhetoric that that the left says that the right is spewing, is this hate rhetoric.
Well, people don't realize,
this white supremacy thing, and I don't disagree that there's a lot of white supremacists on the right. I mean, I think that there's this is my opinion only. I think that there's probably there is proof of that.
It's a fair amount, yeah.
I mean, I don't say it's a majority.
A majority, yeah, but I mean,
there's probably some on both. I'm just saying that, like, the ones that are stupid enough to put themselves out in the media are usually on the right. I'll just say usually. Fair point. 51%. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or 50.1%. I'll even go that far. So I think it's funny that both sides compare each other to Nazism, because there's such a stigma against Nazism. I'm not saying that Nazism is okay.
Right,
I'm not saying that. But you have to realize what Nazism was. It was National Socialism. It was, I'm proud to be German, and German is this, and German is this, and we are proud to be German. And what did that turn into? Only German things are okay.
Yeah.
Anything outside of this, the party line, that's burning books and burning ideals. And then all of a sudden they had an idea. That's when Hitler said, we're doing so. Why are we in this situation? Because of the Jews. And that's how it got to that point. And people didn't even realize how slow of a burn it was to get there. And then all of a sudden there was a raging inferno. And I think that we, both sides are fearful of that. And I'm glad that they're fearful of that and recognizing the bad traits in each other. But, I mean, it's I just think that it's funny that, like, at the end of the day, they're both calling each other Nazis.
Well, I was going to say, the problem is recognizing the bad traits of each other, but also embracing those as saying, as long as it's my side doing it, we're good. Yeah. That's the problem of that. Yeah. So, but yeah, when you look at the long haul of this, though, I mean, and I'm glad you pointed out kind of some of these unfair terms of Treaty of Versailles. This is what happens after World War I. Wilson at the time, I know we're going to get into the whole, Wilson was a racist kind of thing, but Wilson, PhD, John Hopkins, he was a very, very much an old liberal, and so the 14 points he writes, the idea of the world order that he wanted to develop, League of Nations, that sort of thing, but his absolutely prescient warning to the Allies at the time was, do not do this to Germany, okay? Because you will facilitate another problem that's going to come out of this. And I mean, little did they know there's going to be basically a world crash economically. We're all really the world goes into a Great Depression. And because of these kind of, really harsh terms on Germany, they're going through these really terrible times. And I mean, Hitler's there. And that's why if anybody ever decides to, do it, read something of Mein Kampf, and you will get a sense of what Hitler is watching, and whether you understand that or not, whether you want to recoil from it.
It's all about if you identify with
well, and that's what I'm saying. Well, but what I mean to say is you can identify with someone who is seeing things in his country in a certain way that then you could then talk about polluting that with whatever craziness you want to attach to that. But the fact is, looking at suffering and then saying this is the solution, whoa, calm down. Yeah. But there is a sense of where you can understand this kind of nationalism that rises out of it, that there's this sense of we're going to, push we'll come out into the world. Let's triumph, that sort of thing. And you can see everybody gets on board with that. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, we've been in the dark. Let's get out in the light. Let's make it happen.
So you're saying they just try to understand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, put it this way. I know, whatever this, but I mean, as someone,
basically you're saying Mein Kampf is good except for the
yeah, or no, I rather the entire destruction of Europe. Yeah. But I mean, and fascism in general. Yeah. What I mean to say is, ideology, like, it's like when I walk my students through this, it's like that's the only way to gain an understanding of what exactly is happening, and then at the same time also because it's not about seeing the outward signs of fascism, because guess what? By then it's too late. Mm-hmm. It's knowing the precursors, knowing what's going to lead you there, which is these kind of uncertain times. That's where leaders like that rise. It happens. People they want guidance. They want something strong. I think that's why you're seeing certain parties that want something authoritarian, right? Mm-hmm. They want someone who just bulldozes things. They don't want to deal with anybody else. It's not about compromise anymore. It's about getting things done. And guess what? That's just un-American to some degree. Yeah. I'm sorry to tell you that, but that's just not how this works. Now, you might talk about suffering by the majority, but guess what? There are parts built into our system where, the minority has a certain way of pushing back. So this isn't, needless to say, a lot of what I think people have in their heads about this kind of certainty of things, again, is ignorance, and they just don't really understand.
And that's exactly, somebody made a post on Facebook the other day, and I hate to reference it, but well, you know what? I don't, because I don't hate to reference the post. I just hate to reference Facebook, but it made a good point. Somebody posted something about 1984 and like we're in this Orwellian society and like everybody needs to realize like where we are, blah blah blah, and somebody posted and was like, have you ever read 1984?
Nope.
Because I will be honest with you, I have not read 1984. I know the general gist of like the Big Brother, like kind of what it's about, and like when you say like this is very 1984-esque, I know what you're referring to. But I have not read 1984.
Good book, and it's not very long.
Yeah, I've heard it's not.
It's quick read.
I mean, your point to like, hey, we really need like those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it, kind of thing. It's one of those things where you're talking about like, oh, go read Mein Kampf and like understand. You can understand where Hitler was coming from and kind of see the things. That way you can see them as they start if they ever start presenting themselves in our society. I tend to. I mean, I agree with you on the point. I think that you should read the Cliff Notes of Mein Kampf. I think that you can you can probably read it without the Aryan society.
Yeah, well, that's kind of why I meant probably pick something out of it. Don't read the whole thing.
Cliff Notes is a good one.
But if you were gonna read book, the Cliff D's, right?
Throw some water at that burn. Gotta throw some water on that. Some aloe vera on that burn. Yeah.
I had to. I mean, this whole episode is...
Oh, it's a cliff!
But the one thing I have not... I mean, because I want to put this out there, and this is probably going to also burn me down, and that's fine. But because people often don't hear me say this, and I don't get a chance to really talk about it often. But, let's talk about 2016 and let's look at President Trump coming into office and look at the possibilities, but more so take away all the things he said, take away the tape, just like you really have to almost just look at what some of the things that he possibly had the potential to do. Yeah. Trump really was not a Republican. He had no ideology, and for the most part, he'd been a Democrat for the longest time. He'd also dabbled in some of the Republican politics. He's been to some of the conventions, but for the most part, he's kind of he's apolitical. Yeah, he'll be fiscally possible. Even then, I beg to maybe he's definitely all about debt. He's a king of debt. So I don't. So it's kind of a that's something that because
you'd be worth $1 billion if you owe over $1 billion in debt.
And I think that's why when you hear, so here's some of the things that I think that people, when you really listen to him on the campaign trail, when you heard Republican like orthodoxy come and grab him and say, you don't talk like that, stop it. When he was saying, hey, Bernie's right, we should have universal health care. Whoa, hold on now. A Republican candidate is saying that? Like what the, that's crazy. When you hear, I think when you've heard him talk about some of the things that, especially like the $2,000 check thing.
Do you think that's why he didn't work harder to repeal Obamacare, because he was really like didn't want to?
No, I think what it comes down to is he really just didn't understand. I don't think he grasped the policy part of that, whether what they were trying to replace it with and what was being repealed. Like, I don't think I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, and by the way, that's not to say anything about his, because I can hear people, MAGA Nation, he's smart, you don't know, he knows 4D chat. Okay, but at some point, I don't care whether a man gets elected to office. You literally can be without the tools that are necessary to understand deep policy. That is really, really complicated, right? I mean, I've studied policy. I couldn't tell you all the ins and outs of the thing, right? I'd have to sit there and study it. It takes time. So as a president, this is why he has people in his administration who are doing these things. But at the same time, how much does he really understand about all of it? I don't know. But I would say the possibility that he had, right? Again, the potential to actually be kind of a game-changing president where he's not really beholden to a party, that he kind of does what he thinks is right necessarily, but not something that's ideologically conservative or ideologically progressive. Like he's just charting his own course.
Do you think he would have been better off running as like an independent?
Well, what I'm saying is he could have done it as a Republican. It wouldn't have mattered. Because at the end of the day, what you're seeing after the storming of the Capitol, where there still is this 40% or whatever, and he still has control of the Republican Party, there's not a damn thing that man can do to get these people to run from him.
That's true.
I mean, there's not a damn thing he can do.
Everything in
and by the way, he has changed them fundamentally. These were people who, hung on everything that was Reagan, which was free market economics, which was free trade, which was most people understood was, basically selling your.
Which, by the way, you make a good comparison because Reagan was another, non-politician. People forget Reagan was a fucking movie star.
Well, yeah,
he decided to run for office.
Well, but the thing is, Reagan was highly ideological. I mean, most people may not know at home, but Reagan gives one of the greatest speeches. I mean, you can watch it. It's like an old black and white, but it's him where he makes this big anti-communist speech. I believe it's at one of the Republican conventions. It's what really gets him out there. But he's kind of always had this ideology. It's been something that's been with him as he's gone on. So when he gets there, yes, so this is something that people I think would have expected from him. Whereas Trump, again, he's amorphous. You don't really know. He could have gotten there and just started surprising the hell out of people and starts pushing for policies that nobody would have expected a Republican president to do. I mean, basically, he had the potential to be a Teddy Roosevelt, as it were, right? A progressive Republican or whatever you want to call it, maybe a Republican that just doesn't follow the line. But I think that what ends up happening is he turned so much over to the Republican orthodoxy that so much of his agenda got out of his hand that he's having to somewhat defend, but not really understanding why he's doing it. But then now it's a bludgeon because the other people hate him. So now he's just doing it because he's going to fight them because he doesn't like them and they don't like him. And
he doesn't know what to say. So he just
and that's what I'm saying. Then it just devolves into. So really, that's what I said. I think because I'm willing to tell you right now, when we get into Biden's administration, mark my words, I know there's going to be a lot of problems when we get there. When I say problems, I mean we're going to still have the hyperbole. There's still going to be radical stuff being said. But I'm willing to bet that we're going to start talking about policy like we used to talk about policy. It's going to be a good old boring, only those people who pay attention to it again are going to pay attention to it again, because they ain't going to be nothing like him constantly doing things that take away from these kind of essentially dinner table kind of policy things that, again, people will stop worrying about, and those people in Washington will be dealing with it.
So go back to normal, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, that's really, well, at least that's what that.
You make a fair point. I feel like no matter what the policy was, just because Trump was one way or the other on it, made it into a conversation that would, what you would call dinner table conversation, where it was something that would be brought up constantly. I mean, that's a fair point. People pay attention to Trump because it's like a fucking train wreck. I mean, he's a reality TV star.
Well, he's also a businessman too, and
Is he though?
No.
He's
What I'm trying to get at, what I'm trying to get at is that businessmen, they're going to do whatever they can for the most part to get their way, to be successful.
True.
You know what I mean? So
Hustler.
He's going to bulldoze, like he said. He's going to bulldoze to get his way.
I just want you to know.
There you go.
But no, and I'm with you. I think that when we talk about the stuff that he brought to the fore, this again is the problem. There's so much that he left on the floor, man. I mean, really, at the end of the day, so much he left on the floor to essentially carry water for I think things that, like, I mean, maybe he had these things in his heart. I'm not really sure, but was he a Stephen Miller guy, or was Stephen Miller just somebody that he knew was, kind of giving? Stephen Miller is essentially the architect of a lot of the immigration stuff. He was he once worked under Jeff Sessions and the child separation policy, things like that. So Stephen Miller, people really don't like the guy.
Okay.
So here's the thing. It's like at the end of the day, was it just that? Are these people who he was like, man, I like that they piss people off, so good, and that's getting me buzz, and I got my tweets, and like, and again, I know someone's probably gonna be like, man, are you almost saying that he really didn't have any? I mean, or he had no hand? I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that there's some sense that pushing some of this policy. I mean, I think sometimes he was just completely ignorant. Now, at the end of the day, is it his responsibility? Absolutely. Does it fall in his lap? Sure, it does. But I think at some point, sometimes it's just
He said that about Obama.
basically.
He's like, you're in the hot seat.
Yeah.
All that falls on
Shit
you.
rolls one way.
And I
Yeah.
think,
And he was president,
yeah.
he's like, I take no responsibility.
Yeah, I love that one. I take no responsibility. So I think what people will understand with my kind of going around in circles, this is the easiest way to put it. At the end of the day, it was about owning the libs, and owning the libs does not get you A to B. That only talks to a certain group of people, and you're not talking to everybody else. I mean, outside of Corona and some of the things that I think really did set him up for failure, was he going to cruise to probably a re-election? I think so. I really think so.
I thought he was going to win it.
I think he would have cruised, but I think that this man continuously shot himself in the foot. And you can see that happen in Georgia. And so despite whatever conspiracy theory stuff I think you might hold in your heart, there's something about just, normal politicking that I think if you've been in the game, you've ran campaigns, you've been out there, those people know what I'm talking about. That kind of stuff does matter. It will trickle down. It will have an effect. And so, it is what it is at the end of the day. So.
Yeah.
I think that's a good sum up of your entire, and which brings us into the next section, the sum up argument. So, Jake, Chris has said his piece. Why don't you say,
in conclusion?
Yeah, sum up
No, I mean, was there string pulling? Was he a puppet? Maybe. We will never know. I just know that it comes down to one party's ideologies, and it's so tunnel vision that that's why I was more of going back to 2018, a Beto fan, man, because he was there openly.
Stuff going on.
I mean, not gonna lie, that's pretty genius. That's another one of those, you just know how to tap into something, I just know you dig Whataburger. I'm in. I'm in. I saw him dip that spicy ketchup, right? That you're in. We're getting.
No, you're good. No, you're good. Now he openly was wanting, you can't just run it your way, and they can't just run it their way. There needs to be bipartisanship. And he was willing to work with the Republicans and openly admit to that. We need to do that. That's why I like him so much. Right now, it just seems so blue and so red. that I think we need to steer clear from that for the most part. I mean, okay, you're gonna have your blue party, you're gonna have your red party. It's just too one-sided, and there's so many insults to each other. Like I don't see how you can push policy and be productive when most of the time and all your energy goes into the impeachment and all that. The first impeachment, maybe, I don't know. The second impeachment, there's so much energy going into that when that energy could be used elsewhere. You know what I mean? And I mean, the guy's leading right now. I mean, he's in the hot seat. We need to do whatever we can to work with the guy. You don't have to agree with him. Man, I don't know, dude. I mean,
you know
what I mean?
No,
like,
in a lot of ways, y'all express things in a way that, I mean, really needs to be heard more than just me. I mean, you know, I'm someone who talks and bubbles and,
Let me ask you a question, Chris. Do you think that all of the, nonpartisan issues are due less in part to Trump and more in part to Mitch McConnell, and it falls onto Trump because he's more brazen and animated?
When you say nonpartisan issue, I guess what do you mean by that?
I guess nonpartisan is not any of the divisive partisan politics that happen, the pitting A against B. When I say nonpartisan, that doesn't mean like not that. The word nonpartisan would refer to something that is
solely Republican, solely Democrat, right?
No, it's not either.
Okay.
What I'm asking is, like, a lot of the stuff that like fell onto Trump's head about, you know, this and this policy passed or didn't or whatever. I personally feel a lot of it has to do with Mitch McConnell, and because a lot of stuff that you know Trump wanted to push through, Mitch was just like silently just like.
Yeah, I mean, you know, no, I think there's because see, this is what I'm talking about to some degree. There's a Republican orthodoxy that you know, forestalled, but at the same time was also willing to be right behind him in some of the most egregious things he did, and they didn't bat an eye. But when it came into doing the federal judges and stuff, it's like, yeah, bring it home, Bubba. Right. We really appreciate it. You know, I mean, that's why you have a Ted Cruz and a Hawley doing the things they do. That's why you have 130 something House Republicans who you know, contested the results in the House and that day of the day of the insurrection, as it were. So. You know, that's kind of the, I mean, yeah, I think that, you know, but does he somehow bear responsibility? Yeah, but I think the other question I heard kind of in there to some degree too is, I mean, how much responsibility does he have for divisiveness? I mean, he's a cog. I mean, this has been going on,
I didn't mean
you know,
that.
no, yeah.
The divisiveness in this.
Oh no! Yeah, absolutely.
Trump, I mean, he's just like an orange highlighter.
Yeah,
he just makes it.
But I want to tell you there are.
Why had to be orange?
Yeah,
because he is orange. So I just thought that was a good pun.
But you know, there are people. I mean, I want to tell you that because these are kind of like little stories that I get to tell sometimes, inside stories. But you know, like Dan Crenshaw, I got to meet him on the trail a couple of times in the local area. And
Brian did too. He got a DUI on the way.
Oh, that's right.
Oh man,
he did.
So I know. So I you know, I had some sidebar. I had some sidebars with him, you know, and this was early on. And you know, I mean, look, man, the guy Kennedy School of Government. You should have heard him before he turned into whatever he turned into. This guy sounded like he was going to be a new brand of the Republican Party. He did not like what was happening. I mean, at least what he expressed to me in personal talks. And then you just kind of go, oh my God, what in the? Hold on now. Like, that's not the man I just had I had a private conversation with him. And it's the same way with Judge Ed Emmett. I got to talk with one-on-one with Judge Ed Emmett recently.
Yeah, it's just to be a different person.
You know, but you talk to these people and these are high up people who were in the Republican Party, and you hear them going, God have mercy. Like, man, I mean, if I could just get somebody and just say, this is not, like, what are you doing? But those voices never really made it out there, you know? They just never got loud enough. Right. And I think now we're seeing kind of the fallout from that. I mean, the Senate's lost, the House is lost, the presidency's lost. I mean, at some point, I don't know, was it how much did you really get out of following the leader here at this point? So,
following the leader, the corn song. Yeah. Well,
I don't even know. To sum up, I'm trying to say moderate. Like I said, I'm kind of moderate on the whole thing. Like I said, I pay attention more to the
CNN or Fox News? Which one?
Facebook.
Okay, there you go. Okay, awesome.
I try to pay attention more to the policies and things that directly affect me, which leads back more to state and local government, which is where the true policies,
right, for sure.
Directly.
Which Texas legislature is about to start. Everybody pay attention.
Talking, we were talking about property taxes and things like that. Got some research to do. But anyway, I think that, kudos to us, to the three of us. Give yourself a pat on the back. I think this was a very civil discussion that we had, and we
I think it was down the middle for the most part.
I think that we have proven that, three people with differing, people on the outside not knowing that we have different political views, can have a moderate discussion, fact-based discussion, some opinionated things, but not hardline opinions, and that was our goal. It was not to knock anything, or not on purpose, at least. I mean, Trump's an easy target just because he's so animated and he's like a cartoon character, and I mean, it's whether or not you like the guy. I mean, you have to admit that he is like this brazen, character that you love to hate, and he's a villain, but he's like I said, he's a villain that you love to hate.
Michael Scott from The Office, baby. I'm sorry, that was an awful.
Yeah, I was gonna say the slick hair one. Yeah, because that's like really bad. Like he totally is like Wall Street, like Gordon Gekko.
First season,
okay, because Ashley showed me that, and I'm like, what's with his hair? Like, and then he finally I think it's is it the second season that he finally starts doing the dry look, and I'm like, oh, okay, like really.
And they were like, oh, this did not go well with ratings groups.
Oh, yeah, let's.
Okay, I'm sorry, Rob.
Sidebar. My favorite episode is when he's signing up for the online dating, and he's like making his username, and he's like child lover.
Oh my!
That has to be it's. Oh damn it! I'm barely on season 3.
Oh
that has to be post.
There's plenty.
Okay,
there's
plenty.
There's
sure.
plenty.
Continue on, Rob. Sorry.
That was it. I was done. That's. I think I don't really want to state opinions on things because I don't, like you said, Chris. I am not willfully ignorant, but I'm blissfully ignorant. I do not want to. There are certain things that I will concern myself with if I have to, but I'm not educated enough to speak to feel like I have a valid opinion,
for sure,
or an opinion that warrants being loudly vocal about it to other people, so that they need to listen to me and say, "Oh, this guy, I should listen to this guy." You know what I mean? I think that if just remind everybody that don't take everything that you read on social media as fact. Do your own research.
For sure.
There's plenty of try to steer clear of the news sources if you can, because they get their source from somewhere. So find where they got it and get the whole truth.
Yeah.
And that's something that everybody needs to kind of remember is, which is something that has come up multiple times in this country, is that every news source is run and owned by somebody with political leanings or an agenda.
Biased opinions,
they will always have a bias, but the source, the fact, is always the same. And so I encourage everybody, try to find the source, try to find the fact, and disseminate your own opinion based on that.
Well, here's a fun fact. I wasn't called Demon Rat today, or Libtard.
Demon Rat. Yeah. That's my I enjoy doing that one. I think that's funny. I think as you come into 2021, just for my last little piece, if you come into 2021, I think what you have to really have an understanding of is that there is great division. There is a certain level of animosity that I don't think we've really understood just yet. We're still living through a pandemic. The after effects, which we're still not really even sure in terms of education, in terms of our economy. We're also talking about in terms of we've watched cities burn. We've watched our capital sacked. I think that it's a time to just kind of sit your ass down for a second, take a breath, right? Realize that, you live in a country with millions others, right? Millions of others.
Yeah.
Your brothers, your sisters, whatever. These are your people, whether you like them or not. This is the way it works, right? We're family, right? It's just kind of the way it works. But I think that's really, it's just people need to take a breath and really see where we are. Because, the thing about it is, though, despite all this, we're still riding, right? We're still here.
Speaking of riding.
That's true.
That's it for us. We will see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you, Chris, for coming out, man.
Thank you.
For coming out.
We love your input, man.
Love you, Jinx.
All right, guys. We'll see you all next time.